from that sort of vertical line, we're generally going to tuck back in here to this deepest point here, what it's called, the radix. So that's that, and the glabellum right here. And so then from here we're going to project out beyond the edge of the nose. Tip of the nose is going to be higher than the base of the nose, so where the septum comes down and across here. And then the nostril will come up and around, and then you have your nostril sitting on the side. Okay, the nasal bones, the actual bone, will be coming around like this. With some all the rest of it, but we sort of have this general sort of structure. And I'm often looking for where the cartilage finishes here and gives us that sort of that. We have this sort of shape. Our model on Sunday actually was a good example of this, where the mouth tends to go up and over slightly like this. Some people have a distinct line like this, and the distinct end of the philtrum, so you get that kind of like real Cupid's bow kind of shape. But in general, I just think of it as like an arc up and over, right? So here, you can think about the arch of the eye making this the pillar, this sort of eye socket pillar on the outside around like this, right? So that's going to come down, and if we follow this down and around like this, a zygomatic process, which is going to finish about halfway from say there to there. That's about where our actual eye socket is going to come down and around like that. Sort of a shape that sort of lays out to the sides. The reason I mention all of this is so that I can explain that you've got a few different lines that you may see in the face. So one is besides the nasal bones. You'll also probably see this line, which is that inner margin of the orbit of the eye, and then it'll kind of fade off where the tissues of the side of the nose come down like this. And it actually comes up underneath where the brow ridge comes over. And then the eyebrow itself, which starts approximately in line with this, is going to go sort of, the darkest part of the eyebrow is in there, where it is sitting underneath where that is rolling over here, okay? So that's then going up and over there, say, to up and over, and that's the bit that can be quite dark in underneath there. The brow ridge itself crosses that inner margin. We might see a little bit of a tone just there, and we might see a bit of a tone just in there, where the corner of the eye is coming in. And then the way that I'm thinking about this is that if that's the angle of the forehead, right, I know that to find that point, I can't project straight down. I'd need to change direction to find that point. So in other words, if that's the plane of the forehead coming down like this, that's going to give me, right, a point in towards that where the radix is, where this is projecting in, so I need to tuck back into here. And then if that's at this point, I'm expecting the nose to project out from there, so I'm expecting a kind of movement outwards, but that angle would actually have to be steeper, right, than that angle. Right? So I'm just sort of, as I'm thinking this through, I'm thinking about those kinds of planes. And again, looking for that general gist of the eyes going across, right, and over sort of the edge of the nasal bone that we might be seeing through there. We've got our brow ridge that's going to come up and over and down through into here. And then we've got that inner margin just on the edge of where that eye is actually starting. expecting that about here, we've got that eye socket finishing in about a position like that. That sort of plane change that goes from here into there, and then that's that. Now in terms of shadow shapes, I did touch on this last time, like on here, the main point that I wanted to make here is if I'm trying to model, I'm going to be looking for the underplane of that nose and then how how it is projecting onto the top lip. There's a septum coming into here, there's a philtrum coming down and finding the lips, right? So that's there. So under here, that's our shadow shape, all the way through here. And so you just want to make sure that you're thinking about this as one shadow region. You know, shadow does deserve to be murky and mysterious and subtle, right? And then when you're trying to model the light zone, right, is if we're trying to then model the light of this, I'm sort of working my way around and modeling the forms in the light, but just being careful not to go overboard. There might be a little bit of shadow on some people in underneath here, but you just have to be quite careful because all of this will belong in the light. That's sort of an upwards facing plane in the sort of lighting that we have here. You might have some modeling around here that goes in towards the light, so there's variation across into there, and then there might be variation across going up through here into towards that light plane down through here, right? So that's another thing. And then when you look at the nasolabial fold, which is hanging off the side here, just in front of where the zygomatic comes around, just remember as well, that region there, that might be a slightly darkened plane, but as I said on Sunday, a lot of the time I will create that change not by putting in darkness, but just by putting in, if I'm in a mid-tone, I'll just make that section there lighter. Okay. So I'm trying to be quite subtle, even though that can be there, you just don't want to overdo that, and you don't want to make that into shadow if it's not shadow, right? So you just be careful there.